Welcome everybody to the December 12th edition of the Mississippi PowerShell User Group. Tonight we have Microsoft MVP Rob Sewell speaking on green is good, red is bad, turning your checklist into Pester Tests. So take it away, Rob.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Hello and welcome. It's 2:30 in the morning over here in the UK. So I don't know, it's something like 8 p.m. over there, I believe, 8:30. So thank you very much for coming and deciding to spend one of your December evenings listening to me talk. So who am I? My name is Rob. I do DBA stuff and automation stuff, and I am a trainer and a DevOpser, and generally, as some of you might have heard just earlier, in and around PowerShell pretty much all day, every day. I like to say my interests are PowerShell automation and SQL because it's PAS, but it never gets a laugh. Interesting fact, as you probably noticed from my Twitter handle, I have quite a large beard, and more relevant in Europe than in North America, I still play cricket even though the beard is grey. I'm a speaker at SQL events and at PowerShell events, PowerShell Europe PowerShell Europe and PowerShell Asia, as well as the PS Day UK and user groups over here, and lots of SQL Saturdays and SQL events. And I'm one of the organisers for the PowerShell Conference Europe and for PS Day UK. And I've written and contributed to a lot of the open source tools in and around SQL Server. So let's think about lists. So today's to-do list is to get up. First of all, drink appropriate liquid. Now that used to say coffee because as I understood it, everybody in IT pretty much runs on coffee. The biggest moans you get is when somebody's turned off the coffee machine or broken the coffee machine, and that's when you hear the loudest complaints. But somebody reminded me that no, some other people like to drink tea. So we changed that to drink appropriate liquid. And then the rest. Now, what I want you to think about when you're watching this session is not that it's anything to do with this is the way that you should do it because a beardy bloke in the UK said this is how it should be done. But actually, how can I make use of this within my organization and my team, in my environment? What can I take from this and make use of to make my life easier? So let's start by thinking about how many checklists we have. Normally when we're sitting and chatting, it comes up with a list. It looks something like this. We've got release checklists. We've got change management type process checklists. We've got incident checklists and disaster recovery checklists. We've got all these sort of processes that we've built up in IT over many years of this is how things get done. This is how we make sure nothing gets missed. This is how we make sure that somebody can come back and see what it is that we've done. But there again, you've also got checklists that some of them where you do in your head and some of them that are first line support type checklists where when somebody phones up about system number one, don't forget the first thing to ask them is, which version are they on, and have they got this installed, and have they made sure their firewall's turned off, or whatever it is that they should or should not be doing. And when you're going and standing in front of a client, before I do a presentation to Mississippi, I don't know how many people are here, but I want to make sure that everything's going to work as it should do. I want to check that everything's going to be in place. So there's a lot of other places where you can turn those mental or actual checklists and have a look at how we can convert them. And we're going to talk about Pester. And Pester provides a framework for running unit tests to execute and validate PowerShell commands from within PowerShell. And that's the part that is so important, is the validating PowerShell commands from within PowerShell. This means that if you're a guy like me and Mike and probably many of you out here listening today, if you can get that information with PowerShell, then you can validate it within PowerShell, then you can write a Pester test. It also means that, Pester is also used for, and was written for and developed for, test-driven development for PowerShell. And as a ops guy, test-driven development was something that I found extremely hard to get my head around, of understanding why on earth would I write these tests first? This is not the way that I write my code. I just keep battering away until I don't get any red, and I do get what I get back, and then we move on and move forward. But now I've been involved in some of these open source projects and done a lot of work with Pester, and I'm beginning to understand that test-driven development is something that can actually make your life much easier. We're not going to touch on any of that at all in the rest of this presentation. It's all going to be about validating what we're doing. What does it look like? This is what it looks like. We start with a describe block. And a describe block shows this with a title that says, this is a group of our tests. And then we have a curly brace. And the curly brace is on the same line. And it has to be on the same line, because otherwise you get one of my favorite PowerShell errors, where it comes up, it nods and winks at you, and it says, have you put the curly brace on the same line? Next, we have a context. Our context block allows us to group our tests and scope them. Now, when we're doing TDD, that has a certain sort of meaning that we need to consider very carefully. In our validation sort of world, this means that we can split up our tests into something that makes sense to us. That is a way that enables us to maybe document the results so that they come out in a way that makes sense. Maybe we're going to look at security or backups or maintenance or databases if we're looking in the SQL world. Maybe we're going to it also enables us to do any setup that we need within that one context. We can keep it within our context block. Then we have our actual test. And our test says, this is a test that passed, or this is a test that failed, so we can see what's going on. Curly brace in the same line. And then on the left-hand side, the value, the result of our PowerShell. And a pipe. And then it says, should be whatever it is that we want it to be, the result of our test that we expect. So what I am should be what is expected. And at the bottom, you can see that we can simply call our Pester with invoke Pester and the name of the script. And the results coming out are executing the script, the describe block, the context block, this is the test that passed, so the name of the test that passed. Now that's important. So in the results, we're getting the name of the test as we've written it in our code. So it makes sense for us to ensure that we name and put the right sort of values into our describe blocks, our context blocks, and our test titles. And then we have a test that fails. It's come up in red, and it says, I expected this, but what I got was this. So yeah, there's a little bit more information floating around at the bottom that perhaps isn't ideal for us to be able to see straight at a glance. But overall, it gives us a nice quick overview of what's happened on our test and what has passed and what has failed. At the bottom, we've got a summary. It tells us how many tests we've run, how many tests we've passed, how many have failed, if you've got any skipped or pending, and some inconclusive, which I have never seen either in test-driven development or in normal in environmental validation. So, as you've probably noticed, I am not the sort of guy that likes to give you bullet lists that are full of text read through the lines of what is on there. I like to make my slides nice and interesting for you to, I'm sorry. We need to talk about should. So we have our should operators, our assertions, and they all say should be, or should exist, or should contain, or match, or throw, or null or empty. I'm not going to go through and read all of those things. I'm just going to say these are the things that are there. And in general, in English, you're going to understand what they mean. But I do want you to take a look at contain. Because contain does not mean that it checks to see if an object is within an array. We don't say should object array should contain object. It says it checks to see if a file contains the specified text. Now we're talking in a PowerShell group, so people who are used to using PowerShell, that's going to be the one that's going to catch you out. So you're just going to think, why is this test failing? The array does contain this object. What's going on here? That'll be why. So what can you validate? Unfortunately, this can only be said in one sort of voice, and the voice goes, everything in the world, which is Jeremy Clarkson at Top Gear, and it's a joke because obviously we can't check.
Can I ask a question?
Everything in the world. You can ask questions anytime you like. I love questions.
So perfect in that last slide. How would you which operand would you use if you were trying to compare something and a thing? I was trying to figure it out in my head and couldn't think of it.
The very best questions are always about something that comes up in the very next slide. So if we do this one, it's on the answer to your question is on the next slide, my friend. So it's not that we can't check everything in the world, and this is merely the objects that are on a SQL Server SMO object, on a job server SMO object, and on a login SMO object. There are still hundreds more properties we can check in SQL Server. And we haven't even mentioned all of the other things that we can connect to with PowerShell. So we're, Exchange, Azure, where WMI calls. Oh, hang on, WMI. That's giving us access to even more things that we can go through and get to. So we're looking at being able to validate a whole load of things. But of course, sometimes there are things that you really, really, really can't check with Pester. So we said at the beginning, one of the things we like to check is for our presentations. So here is a situation that happened to me when I went to the PowerShell Saturday in Stuttgart. And the reason I show it, even though it's silly, is to say this is how you can do contains. And what we have is our describe of our backpacking. I'm going to go to PowerShell Saturday. I am going to make sure I put in my bag all the things I need. And I'm just showing you a little bit of the context block of hardware. So all of the electronics that, as an IT professional, as a speaker, I carry around with me to make sure I can do all of the things that I need to do at presentations and conferences around the world. And my title of my test is The Bag Should Include the Beard Nook. And the Nook was my little next unit of computing that held a domain controller and 13 SQL servers and DNS, and enabled me to show off a little bit more how PowerShell could interact with numerous virtual machines at the same time. So at the beginning of my describe block, I set my $bag array with various things, one of which was the contents. And the contents need to contain my beard nook. Now this is PowerShell, and I'll say this a few times, Pester is just PowerShell. So we can put in this that my array bag holds another array of contents, and that should contain the beard nook using -contains beard nook, because that's just the normal sort of PowerShell that I would expect. And we know that when we run that just straight in PowerShell, that if it does contain the beard nook, it will return a true, and if it doesn't, it will return a false. So I can then pipe that and say should be true. So I had no virtual machines with me when I was in Stuttgart, which I need to change on this slide to make more sense. And that meant that I was up until 3 a.m. rewriting all of my demos so that they would work with what I had available on my laptop and not with a massive number of virtual machines. So I think whilst you laugh at a picture of me at SQL Bits at the party and I have a quick slurp, we will have some demos. Unless, of course, there are any more questions. And as I said, at any point, at any time, just shout out your questions and let's talk through what we need to do. So, as I said, I practice what I preach. Before I run my presentation, I run my Pester test to make sure that I have everything as I expect it. So unless somebody shouts at me, I'm going to assume that everything that you can see is okay, but feel free just to jump in and say it's too big, it's too small, it's too green. No, don't say it's too green. So I check to make sure that I've got some SQL servers running. I'm going to make sure that I should have some programs running. I'm going to make sure that I have the correct program, files open. I don't want to be disturbed by some things which might interrupt me. And I want to check a few other bits and bobs and some networking stuff as well. And we've got a pending here because this test, which when I used to run this and I used to run it with ISE, I've left it in there, but I've changed the test and said, no, I don't want to run that anymore. Because obviously I'm going to use code because code is significantly more interesting for me than using ISE anymore. And I've managed to get it to come out as pending because I've just commented out the test. The test has nothing in it. So it hasn't returned either a yes or a no, or true or false. There's nothing there to do. So Pest has returned that and said, this is pending. So let's have a look and talk about Pester. Pester is an open source module, and it is installed on your machine if you have PowerShell v5 or above. And the beauty of that is that it's the first open source project that got installed with a Microsoft product. And the bad thing about that is that it means it's very difficult to, it's not difficult, it's very, it's not as obvious to update this from the PowerShell gallery to keep our Pester module updated, because we should make sure that we keep all of our modules as up to date as possible as all the new shiny features come through or as the bug fixes start to come in. So what you'll find if you run your Pester like this and you don't have all green and white in your results, but you have some purple or some pinky color in there, you're probably using the default version that was installed with Windows, and you need to update it. And to be able to update it, you need to run install module Pester, just like you do for any module these days. Now that will go to the PowerShell gallery. It's going to grab the module, it's going to bring it down, it's going to install it in the all users. No, not in the all users profile. It's going to make it available for the all users by placing it into the program files directory from PowerShell. Obviously, you need to be running as an administrator to be able to do that. And actually, you need to be able to run as an administrative process as well as somebody with those permissions. And if you haven't got those permissions, or you can't, you're not allowed to by your IT to run install programs for all users, then you use a dash scope current user. And then because of things under the hood, you'll then have to put in a skip publisher check. Otherwise, you get a big load of red saying, oh, it failed this. Before, you might have had to do a force. Once you've done that once, then you have Pester from the PowerShell gallery. Then you can make sure that every now and again, you run an update module for Pester. So if we do a list available of all the Pester modules that are available to us on our machine, you can see I have 3.4.0. That's the old default one that came with Windows. And then I've got a 4.0.3 and a 4.0.8. I don't think I'm quite up to date with, I think there's a .11 that is out very recently, but I haven't updated yet because I haven't checked that everything that I do with Pester is going to work with the updated version. Let's see which one we have. Let's see. Let's not do it like that then. There we go. So we've got 4.0.8 is the one that I've got loaded for my session. And if we look, we're going to start simple with all the things that we can check. So the server returns a ping. We're simply going to use a test connection. I'm going to use a count of 1. I'm going to use a quiet. I'm going to put in error action silently continue, because this is just PowerShell, but actually in Pester what we want to do is only return the results of our test. So we only want the green is good or the red is bad for the results of our test. We don't want it. We don't want to also see all of the errors that we might get in because the command isn't working, or the test connection fails, or our command gives some sort of error. So we'll put just an error action silently continue and hide all of those out of the way. And then we'll say should be true. Maybe we want to check our operating system version. So we can grab the results with a WMI call. And we'll say that it should be this particular version because we know what that should be. We want to make sure that a share is available, a folder is available, or we should have a particular text file. Perhaps a folder should have a certain number of files. Or executable when we release it and hit the wrong thing. Let's come back up there. That are executable when we release it should be of a certain version. Or files should have been created on a date or not modified since this date. Now these are things that I started to think about when I was working at a client, and alongside me I heard a discussion that happened. And the discussion came along the lines of, why are you doing that? The client is not supported. You shouldn't be doing that. It shouldn't be here. Now I was sat with the third line support guys, and the product that they were, one of the products that they were supporting had an XML config file. And the thing was that with this XML config file, you could make changes to it because it was in the client's hands. They could make changes to it and try and alter it to make the program do different things. And as we know, everybody else is cleverer than us, and they all think they can come in and make these changes and make things happen as expected. But the problem was, in the support contract, it said that if you alter any of our files, you're not supported. Makes perfect sense. We don't know what you've done. We're not going to support what you've done. But the error messages that were coming back out of the application were not, they didn't make sense. You didn't sort of go, hey, somebody changed the XML. So first line support would have these calls and they wouldn't know what they were doing, and they're, oh, very sorry. Oh. We'd raise a ticket and they'll pass it on through to the second line. And many of the second line would look at that and not maybe be able to diagnose it, not really realize what was going on. And yes, absolutely, there was a communication and knowledge base error in process that was happening in that scenario. But then they'd pass it on to third line support. And by the time we got to the third line support goes and go, oh, for goodness sake, it's the XML file. But it was simpler and easier for them to just fix the XML file and move on than it was to get into the discussion with the client about how now, however many hours or days later, that they've gone all the way through these first line support and second line support and backwards and forwards. Now they've got the third line support. Third line support are the ones saying you're not supported. The client would get very grumpy. And to be honest, most of the third line support guys knew it was a pretty quick fix, so they just fix it, because we like to fix problems for our customers. And then management got involved. And management was most unhappy because we're fixing things for clients that aren't supported. That's, that's against the contract that we've got agreements with them. This is not acceptable. And also, they would look at their charts and their graphs and say, well, hang on a minute, we've wasted all of this time for our first line support and our second line support and our third line support, and it's cost this much money to support something that's not actually supported by our contract, and blah, blah, blah. And there was waving of hands and gnashing of teeth and banging of desks. And I said, well, we can fix this pretty easily. And they turned around and looked at me. And I said, well, why don't we just write a Pester test? So I wrote a Pester test for the things that they should expect for their normal sort of installation. And it meant that what they were able to do was give something like this to their first line support. First line support would say, hey, you've got these problems. Perhaps could you just open a PowerShell session up and run this code that I've just sent you through? And it would come through and it would come back and it would say, the XML file should not have been modified since the last last release of this product. And that would come back false in this scenario, and it would be red. And the first line support could then have the conversation with the client. They're much more used to dealing with clients on a day-to-day basis and say, sorry, you're not supported because this file has been changed. Thank you very much. The client wasn't happy because their thing didn't get fixed, but more often than not, they understood that they're outside of the support agreement, so it's not going to get fixed. Management were happy because everything was happening as expected. Time and money and resources weren't being wasted on things that weren't supported. And second and third line were happy because they weren't getting disturbed by more and more of these calls. And that's just an example of one way where you can just flip around and think, oh, hang on, here's a thing I can do with Pester that can make mine and my team's life easier. We can check network adapters. We can check, excuse me, gateways. We can check our IIS systems. We can check for websites and app pools and protocols, making sure everything is as we expected. Of course, if we don't have a big NUC with a number of servers on it, we can't check all of those things. And we can check programs. So we can make sure that our client system that depends on having SSMS 17 on it for some strange reason, work with different clients. Some of their things might look a little bit different. So I want a nice, easy way of being able to parameterize my Pester tests, and it means that I can go into a different client and I can pick up their servers. Maybe their SQL admin accounts are going to be different. Their backup directory paths will be different across different clients, but I want to be able to check them. And this is the way that I do this. Let's open the file and have a look. So there's a lot of 600 lines of code, but it basically goes like this. We have some good help because we don't want to write code that other people use. That means that when it goes wrong, they phone us. What I want them to do is to run get help and then find the examples that have been written. Whole load of parameters, lots and lots of parameters, because SQL Server has all sorts of things that you can change and alter and modify, and buttons that you can tweak and different values that you can set. And then remember, this is just Pester. So now we can just loop through our list of servers and we can just do a test connection. And if the test server doesn't exist, we'll just stop then. Don't carry on. Don't fill me full of hundreds of failed tests just because I know I can't get a connection server. Everything's going to fail. I'm going to do some remoting, and this is a relatively good way of making sure that we have some capability of doing some remoting. And again, if we haven't got it, then we just set everything to skip. Oh no, we don't. Sorry, if we haven't got it, then we set everything to right error. But remember, we have no external machines now. I only have my laptop here. And then we say describe. And if you look, now we can start putting our values into our titles of our describe. We see what is going on. And now we have a new thing. It's called before all. I don't need to explain, but I'm going to, what it means, because the kind of thing I love about PowerShell and also about Pester is that what you see, you understand in English. So before all is going to run everything in this code block before all of the tests. And there's another one that you can use, which is called before each. And that's going to run the code within the script block before each of the tests. And that enables us maybe to set variables or gather information within our environmental validation. In this scenario, what we're going to do is we're going to create ourselves a script block and a return object. And then we're going to connect to SQL Server. Grab some SQL Server information. And then we're going to add to our return object all of the things that we want to check. So maybe we want to check our backup history. Maybe we want to do a compare between the sysadmins that we found on the machine and the SQL admins that we've defined in our parameter. Maybe we want to go investigate our SQL Server agent jobs of this name, because that's the name of the Olahalagram is the common maintenance solution that we use in SQL World. And we want to check these things. Is it enabled? Does it have a schedule? What is our schedule frequency type and the time, the day that it's supposed to start? When we go through, we grab all of those things, and then we just run that code against the remote server and create ourselves, we've got our return object. And that makes life really, really easy then, because our Pester tests in general, so go down here and pick one right down in the middle. We can say we should have the log SP blitz to table agent job and the parameter. And our return object, our return array with the object, the property of log SP blitz to table should be whatever is the parameter is that we've set through. So if in this client that I go to, they don't have that, so we don't need it to be enabled, then I can just set my parameter that I pass into the script to be false. And then this will just be false and everything will be configurable. So let's run that and have a look and see what it looks like. So it's going to import that particular function, and we're going to run it with our parameters. And now what we're going to get is a load of yellow. We're going to get a load of yellow because I don't have any external virtual machines to check, because there's no point you just seeing what goes on, but also because it shows you that that Pester is just PowerShell, and that we can skip our tests. So this yellow is because the test has been skipped, not because it's passed, not because it's failed. And the thing that I forgot to point out in this file, which I'm just going to reopen, is we have a skip parameter available to us on each one of our tests. And I can set that dynamically. That's what that enables. So this solution enables me to now quickly and easily go through, and if the path is different in this client, then I can go with a different client. Or if they don't have a domain called the beard for some strange reason, then we can make use of whatever domain they're using and which Windows group they're using for their SQL admins. And it makes it nice and easy. I don't have to change any of the tests, just have to change my parameters. Ooh, everything is beautiful. These headphones suddenly block out whenever I get any call from an application. So that's beautiful for when we have one particular type of test that we want to run against a different set of servers or instances. But this is a solution that I think enables you to nicely build up a set of tests. It's a good way to start when you're using Pester. So what we have here is a file called demo number 3 dot tests with a capital T dot ps1. It's a very particular naming convention, and it's named in that way because this means that when I invoke Pester against a directory, Pester's just going to look through the directory. In some environments I make use of Hyper-V and a good naming convention. I make sure the SQL servers are all the ones that the name is like this and the state is like this. I'll grab those. And then we can loop through our SQL server. And the way of doing that is using this parameter. And this parameter is test, and this parameter is test cases. So on our it block, which is our test, we've now said, here's a parameter called test cases. And the test cases we've created by looping through our SQL servers array and adding to our test cases array name equals and whatever the name of our SQL server is. So we have our name in our array. We access the name by using less than and greater than around the name in the title of our test. Our test now needs to have a param block because now we've got a parameter for our test, and the parameter is name. And then within the test, we can then make use of our parameter name. And now we're going to use a DBA tools command called test DBA SQL path. And I love this command. It's beautiful because in this world of where we need to look after, we know that we need to look after our data more carefully. Human being user accounts are not allowed, in some places, not allowed access to the backup share where the backups get stored. Because, hey, we don't trust our DBA to be not taking all of our backups of our data and going out and selling them, using Tor to sell them on the black, dark, deep web or whatever the papers call it this week. And as a DBA, I still need to know that my SQL Server has access to that share. Or maybe if I've got SSIS and things running, I need to know that SQL Server has access to certain shares to pick up files for doing things that I, as a user, don't have access to because of security. So this enables me to run using this on this SQL instance, using the permissions of the SQL Server account, and check whether I have access to that particular backup share. So that's one way of doing a loop within Pester, but it doesn't work very well for multiple loops. But Pester is just PowerShell. So we can do all of the things that we know how to do in PowerShell. So we can loop through our SQL servers just using our for each method. If we're using PowerShell version 4 or above, I would use the for each method. You'd use for each object if you need to. And then, so we can loop through each of our SQL servers, and we want to test our database owners, and we grab our results for our entire instance, and then we can loop through each one of those results, and then write ourselves our test relating to those results. So there's two different ways of looping through our tests. And in this case, we're going to have a different sort of tag. So we're going to look at this tag as being a database tag, and this is going to be about our owners. And that means that we can just call Pester with our tag. It's going to come through 3.7 seconds. It's going to have run 34 tests, all about backups. I'm going to check our disk space. We can make sure that everything is exactly as it should be. Oh, look, and it's not quite. My favorite test that DBA Tools does is the dbcc check DB. it is remarkably difficult for a DBA to check across, what have we done, 3 instances and about 40 odd databases to check when the last time a DBCC check DB was run. It's not something very easy, and I can do it in 6.66 seconds. That was nice rounding up there. But maybe some of these things are going to be they're going to be first line support tests, or maybe these are going to be the tests just for our UAT environment, or just for system A. We can now start to tag them and manipulate them, put them all in one place to keep them safe and hopefully source controlled. And anybody could then run them and make use of the tag and only run the tests that they need. Maybe first thing in the morning, we could just run our morning tests. Maybe in the case of, oh my God, everything's gone wrong, we could run our disaster recovery tests. There's ways of doing that. So if we have a look at our TempDB test, I put so many of these in here to show off that there we go. You'll see that the result we got, I expected true, and what I got was true, 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 false, true. Not really telling us a lot of information here. And the reason for that is if we actually look at what testDBA TempDB configuration does, is it gives us, in fact, let's put that to a table and make life a little bit easier to see what's going on. What it's doing is it's checking a number of settings. So it's checking we have a certain trace flag enabled. It's checking, it's counting the number of files we've got. It's seeing if our file growth is in %, and if our file location is in the right place, because we should never have our SQL Server files sat on the C drive where our operating system is, and that our max size is set. And as you can see, we've got 1 false. So here we've got a PowerShell result that's coming back, and it's giving us an array of trues, but here we have 1 false. So that's not making life much easier. So remember that. Keep that in mind, because at later updates we're gonna come back to that. And as you can see, we could see that some, or most of the tests that I wrote have got more than 1 tag. So we can go through, we can look at this is doing our disk-based test as well as our power plan test. If we used our server level tag, if we pick our instance level tag, we're going to run a number more commands. And we'll start going through, and it's going to start running a whole bunch of stuff. It's going to do some network latency. We're going to check our max memory. We're going to check our link servers on our instances. And there we go. We've run 35 tests in 15 seconds. Enables us to go through and do stuff. I remember I don't want to be saying this is exactly how you should do stuff. What I want you to do is think, this is something that I can do. This is how I could do this here. Wouldn't it be good if I could do that with my team, or if we could make use of this thing or that thing? So we can go into with our parameterization of our Pester tests, an example. We can go and make sure that we can run the same tests with a number of parameters. And with our tagging, we can make use of doing things in a different way, picking out certain tests that we want from a folder. But now, if we want to get a little bit more complex, one of the things that we can do is make use of a JSON file. I chose JSON just because I chose JSON. I just figured like it was a bit of fun to try and work out. And for our JSON file, we can say, right, okay, set this as a configuration and invoke some Pester. And for our TempDB block, what I want you to do is I want you to go through, again, the setup for the Hyper-V search. As I said, going and getting our SQL servers from a certain version. Now we've got a name search, which enables me now to pick different versions of SQL Server because of their naming convention was very good for this particular client. So I can actually go and set a configuration. If their tempdb configuration meant that they didn't have the 118 trace flag for a certain version of SQL Server, then there's no point testing for that. And now I can get a little bit more granular about what it is that I want to do. And I can say, when you're running on Rob's laptop, don't run the files on C test because he only has a C drive. If we just do a skip equals true. Or we could just do a skip skip true for the entire test. And we can set up a number of these, enables us to write a config. And maybe this config is a config that we use for certain systems or for certain clients. And that means that now we can run a whole bunch of tests, read one out of 15,000 tests. And once it's finished, I start scrolling up. I know my finger's getting sore. Maybe I start going page up. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, hang on. I can't go up. If I try this in a normal PowerShell session, I'll get a buffer overflow, or sometimes on here, a buffer overflow memory exception. Hang on a minute. I run all these tests, but I can't actually see the results that I want to see now. I'll just do failed. Failed will just show me the failed tests. That's absolutely perfect. Except when you have 2,000 instances of SQL Server, each one has a DBA admin database on, and the DBA, one of the tests that fails is my DBA admin database has corruption. But now I don't know which DBA admin database it is because only one of them failed. If we do fails, please excuse me while I have a drink. That's better. If we do fails, then what it shows us is our describe block and our context block and any failing tests and also any skipped tests. So that means that maybe our describe block would be describe instance, blah, blah, blah. Our context would be testing instance tempdb. And now we're going to get a failure. I'm going to know this failure is to do with this particular instance. And of course, you must point out, you could write your tests titles in a good way to make sure you get that information out for yourself. So let's move on again. And it's going to be a SQL thing, but it's going to be a thing that hopefully you can understand and make use of for anything else. So I did a piece of work and I was putting in Ola Hallegran's maintenance solution. And when we do Ola Hallegran's maintenance solution, we know it does a number of things. And to prove that I had completed my task, I needed to check and say, hey, I've done this. Here you go. Show him the screen and he'll be happy. Managers don't really work like that. I'm going to show this, the results of this just for a sec. So it's going to run through, it's going to do all of those tests, it's checking all of those files, it's checking all of the jobs, and we're checking 3 instances now and, I don't know, 50, 60 databases, something in that region. And as you can see, I haven't done everything that I should have done for looking after this database environment. But I have just run 300 and something tests in 30 seconds. There's no way a human being could do that. And there's no way a human being could do that reliably. They might be able to speak, perhaps, but they couldn't say. And we can make use of our Pester within our CI and our CD process. So we can have an output file path and an output format of any XML. And now we can invoke our Pester and create ourselves some XML, and we can make use of that XML within any of those processes. VSTS, oh, my brain's gone dead at 3:30 in the morning. But any sort of CI process, any of those tools you can use will be able to consume an XML file, which is just the results of our Pester. But we could also set the results of our invoked Pester to a variable. So we still have our variable. A variable is beautiful because it tells us our total, our passed, failed, skipped, and also our test results. And each one of those is going to be the results of a test. You see, this is all our hologram tests. And now we can convert that into JSON. But one of the other things we could do is, while this is opening, is answer one of my favorite questions, which is, can I take action on the results of a test? And the answer is yes and no. Because no, whilst Pester is running, you can't take action on the test. Pester is about giving you the results of the test. And you can't make a change for that. But what you could do is get your PowerShell object and iterate through it and look for a test results where the title is the service isn't running, and try and do a start service to make the service run. Or do some other stuff, because we're just working with PowerShell and PowerShell objects. But we've taken the results of our invoke Pester and we've put them into a variable, and we converted that into JSON. And now if you go to my website, you can grab the Power BI file that is available on the blog post, and you can simply plug it into this. And when you open up the one that comes down off the website, it has the instructions tab, which just say change the source of the results to this particular JSON file. And it'll come up, and it comes up, and it means that you have something that clicks and moves. As you click around, you can get some more information. So you can see, if we look at Rob XPS Dave, you see bucket changes, and now 2.38 of those. Let's have a look at the backup jobs. The backup jobs, oh, hang on a minute, 92% of those passed, but now we can see what information we've got here, and we see what our failure message is. If we drill down into one particular test, we see we expected it to be succeeded, but it was actually unknown. Look at how long our tests take to run. So if we choose our file checks, oh, what a surprise. A file check took the longest, it took 9 seconds. But maybe the all cleanup jobs, that only took 3 seconds. And on SQL 2016, yeah, it took 1.3 seconds to do the all cleanup jobs. And we can start having a look at this information in a nice, pretty way. And one of the things we know as professionals, IT professionals, is that if you give management beautiful graphs and things that click and change, buttons that they can press, they're going to go through and they're going to start filtering stuff and clicking and looking, and they're not actually going to realize that what this means is that, you know, 92% of these tests have passed and 8% have failed, because they're going to be looking at I can click around and I can see what's going on. Beautiful thing. And you could put it up on a screen in the back of the office and scroll through it and have the Power BI loaded from a JSON file that you create every morning before you come into work, and, you know, automate yourself and make life really, really simple. So what we've learned, hopefully, over the past hour is that you've all got some checklists. You've got some in your head now. Hopefully you've got some ideas about what we can do. Because manual testing is error prone. As a human being, I'm not always going to do the same thing again and again and again. We've learned that Pester is a unit testing framework for PowerShell, but as ops guys can still embrace it and use it to validate our environment. The basic syntax of describe, a context, and its code blocks. And don't forget, you've got to have the curly braces on the same line, otherwise you're going to get my favorite error. The should command is used for testing our assertions, and there's a whole list of things that you can test and ways that you can test it. You can use your NUnit XML, you can use a report viewer XE, and you can make HTML reports, and that's something you'll find on the internet. You can use the NUnit XML output and you can put it into your CI and CD process. I personally wouldn't use the report viewer XE because it lies. And as a DBA, I don't trust the results of it anymore. I once did a test, outputted the results to the HTML report, and it said instance number 1 passed results 102. Instance number 2 passed results 150. Instance number 3 passed results 150. Total passed results 4,572. Oh, hang on a minute. Something is wrong here in the way either that something changed in the way Pester created results or something changed in the way the report viewer analyzed them, but it no longer worked. And actually, you know what? I think the Power BI is prettier. So you can use it to export your JSON from there. This is the point where we ask for questions. And you're allowed to laugh at the picture. So I have no questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Just for a very short amount of time there, I thought, crikey, have I just been sat talking for half an hour or 40 minutes in 3 o'clock in the morning to myself in a hotel room?
Yeah, that wouldn't have been good.
So the other thing I'd say is my name is Rob. You can grab, that's my website address, SQLDBA with a beard. My Twitter account is SQLDBA with beard. And the reason for that is because when I changed my Twitter handle, I very quickly became SQLDBA with a bear, which wasn't quite what we intended, but it's the limit of the Twitter thing. So there's no A in my Twitter handle. If you want more information, go and have a look at Adam Bertram's Pester book. That is undoubtedly the best place to get a whole detailed amount of information. You can watch Andre and I at the PowerShell conference in Europe doing some stuff with AppVeyor and validating stuff. That's how DBA tools is validated. That's the way that works. I'm obviously going to say that at the PowerShell conference in Europe, there are some excellent sessions from about Pester coming through. I don't know what there is coming through at the PowerShell Summit. I can't remember the sessions because I can't get to the States, so I'm pretending it's not existing. But you can find out more information there. And that's me done and dusted.
Well, thank you. It was a really, really good session. I appreciate it, Rob.
No, you're welcome. You're more than welcome. And like I said, if anybody has any questions and they're too shy, which I doubt from over there, but if any of you are too shy, feel free to get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to talk more Pester.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much yourselves. You all have a really good evening, and enjoy Christmas. Happy Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you as well. And I guess get some sleep, man. Thank you for staying up so late or so early.
No worries. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.